This is Mac OS Ken.
Could have been better, could have been worse. We're looking at Apple's second quarter earnings call this Friday, the 5th of May, 2023. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/MacOSKen. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSKen. I've been doing this for 17 years, and yet I never, ever know how to start on Apple's quarterly earnings. Do the good news, and there was good news. Do the bad news? Yeah, there was that too. Focus on the thing on which Apple CEO Tim Cook focused. Yeah, let's do the good news. In Apple's earnings press release, the Cupertino company reported an all-time record in services and a March quarter record for iPhone, despite the challenging macroeconomic environment. Though growth for products outside of iPhone decelerated, they still sold more stuff. That means Apple's installed base of active devices, which hit an all-time high in the December quarter, hit a new all-time high in the March quarter. I snuck in the bad news, by the way. Growth for products outside of iPhone decelerated. But we'll get to that. Starting with iPhone, as Cook and Apple CFO Luca Maestri did, Apple's wrap rod brought in revenue of $51.3 billion, a rise of 2% versus the same quarter a year earlier, and a record for the March quarter, as I mentioned. CFO Maestri said that was due to very strong performance in emerging markets, from South Asia and India to Latin America and the Middle East. Emerging markets was the theme CEO Cook kept humming, the drum he kept beating, the thing with which he wanted analysts to walk away. In his opening statement about Apple's business in general, Cook said he and his were pleased with the performance they saw in emerging markets and achieved all-time records in Mexico, Indonesia, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the UAE, as well as a number of March quarter records, including in Brazil, Malaysia, and India. Mr. Maestri added March quarter records for a few more regions, including Australia, Canada, Spain, and Switzerland, among others. Not emerging markets, but records worth noting nonetheless. But we were talking about iPhone. CFO Maestri said the device set March quarter records in several developed and emerging markets, with India, Indonesia, Turkey, and the UAE doubling on a year-over-year basis. The iPhone installed base is at an all-time high, with growth in every geo tracked. And here in the States, people are nuts for them. 451 research shows customer satisfaction for the iPhone 14 family at 99% in the US. Now let's pump the brakes. Mac revenue came in at $7.2 billion, down 31% versus last year's Mac revenue of $10.4 billion. Apple CFO put the fall at the feet of macroeconomic concerns, foreign exchange headwinds, and a particularly tough compare. While Apple did release new machines in the March quarter, the previous year's launch of the completely reimagined M1 MacBook Pros sort of outshined. Folks who buy them love them, though. 451 research puts customer satisfaction in the U.S. at 96%. The Mac's installed base hit an all-time high in every region, according to the company. On now to iPad, which brought in revenue of $6.7 billion. That represented a drop of 13% versus the $7.6 billion brought in for the same quarter a year earlier. Again, a tough compare and a wobbly macro are the named culprits. That said, iPad's installed base hit an all-time high in every geo tracked. Over half of people buying an iPad last quarter were buying their first iPad, according to Apple. Wearables, home, and accessories generated revenue of $8.8 billion, down just 1% versus the same quarter a year earlier. It was just the wobbly macro this time, though the category did set March quarter records in Apple's two biggest markets, the US and Greater China. Installed base for Apple Watch hit, say it with me, a new all-time high. Nearly two-thirds of customers purchasing an Apple Watch during the quarter were new to the product, according to CFO Maestri. And now, let us once again punch it. Services brought in revenue of $20.9 billion, an increase of 5.5% over the $19.8 billion realized in the year-ago quarter, and setting an all-time quarterly record. That included all-time revenue records for advertising, App Store, Apple Care, Apple Music, iCloud, payment services, and video. Shoutouts from Apple CEO Cook for Apple TV Plus titles like Tetris, The Big Door Prize, Ted Lasso, and the Oscar-winning animated short The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. Mentions made also of Apple Music Classical, Apple Pay Later, Major League Baseball, MLS on Apple TV, the launch last month of Apple Card Savings, and was there anything else? Oh yeah, 975 million paid subscriptions. 975 million paid subscriptions. CFO Maestri said that is more than double the number of paid subscriptions facilitated by Apple just 3 years ago. How the what the huh? Well, 2 billion active devices will do that, especially when over 1 billion of them go everywhere with their owners. Also, Maestri said Apple keeps improving the breadth and quality of its current services offerings. Looking ahead, there's the brain part and the heart part. The brain part will leave to Maestri. The CFO says June quarter year-over-year revenue performance will be similar to the March quarter. Revenue for the March quarter was down 3% versus the same quarter a year earlier, so they're looking for another drop, it seems. Services are expected to see growth this quarter, similar to last, though digital advertising and mobile gaming will still lackluster. Gross margin is expected to come in between 44 and 44.5%. OPEX is expected to be between 13.6 and 13.8 billion, and the tax rate should be around 16%. What is in it for shareholders? Well, Apple's board has authorized an additional $90 billion for share repurchases, according to Apple's CFO. Additionally, they've declared a cash dividend of 24 cents per share of common stock, payable on the 18th of May to shareholders of record as of the 15th. Moving to the heart part, CEO Cook said, "We're constantly striving to make a positive difference in people's lives and be a force for progress. We're investing in education to give students the skills they need to shape the future. We're helping to create pathways of opportunity for communities of color through our Racial Equity and Justice Initiative. And every day we're building an even more inclusive and diverse Apple rooted in our culture of belonging." He then talked about Apple's many environmental initiatives before adding, "We are determined to do our best work on behalf of our customers and to give them the tools that can enrich lives. So we will manage for the long term, just as we always have, with our eyes to the horizon, with limitless creativity, and with a deep belief that we can achieve anything we put our minds to." We'll eavesdrop on the Q&A between Apple and its analysts in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, BetterHelp, online therapy. How much of your time is for you? Between work, family, social commitments, it can be easy for your needs to take a back seat. But if you don't give to yourself, there's less to give to others. It's not selfish for you to take care of you. Therapy can help you find balance in your life, so you can be there for others and yourself. BetterHelp simplifies the therapy process. The whole thing happens online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and if you want to switch therapists for any reason, you can. Doesn't cost anything extra. I really like that online part. No going, no waiting. And yet, even though it's at a distance, for me, BetterHelp was a bit more personal than traditional therapy. I think it was the part where I could message outside of a designated session. Made it less like an hour of my week and more like an ongoing conversation. If you're considering therapy, try it and see. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/MacOSKen today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/MacOSKen. BetterHelp.com/MacOSKen. What say we go to the phones? Or follow Apple to them anyway. Mad props to Morgan Stanley analyst Eric Woodring for asking a question that has vexed me for months. He didn't get a real answer, but still. The question: did Apple make back the iPhone sales in the March quarter that were missed in the December quarter due to COVID disruptions in the supply chain? Apple CEO Tim Cook said they think they got some back. Certainly iPhone did better in the March quarter than it did in the December quarter, but it's hard to quantify. Production was where they wanted it to be, so yeah, see, only kind of an answer. Woodring also asked about emerging markets like India. Say the secret word, win $100. Emerging markets was the tune Tim Cook kept whistling. Apple's business in India grew very strong double digits last quarter versus the same quarter a year earlier. It also set a quarterly record. They got a couple of stores in India now. They've got channel partners with which they've partnered. There's dynamism. There's vibrancy. There's a lot to like about India. But there are other emerging markets. With that, the CEO again listed regions where the company saw either March quarter records or best quarter ever records. And so, said the CEO, we're putting efforts in a number of these markets and really see, particularly given our low share and the dynamics of the demographics, etc., a great opportunity for us in those markets. B of A analyst Wamsi Mohan kind of blew his first question, sort of repeating Eric Woodring's. Did Apple see a catch-up on the Pro model specifically in the March quarter, and was the mix better than typical? Turns out that was still hard to quantify 3 minutes later. Mr. Mohan's second question brought us back to the corner of brain and heart. With the launches of Apple Pay Later and Apple Card Savings and such, where does Apple see itself going with the whole payments thing? CEO Cook likened what Apple is doing in payments with what it's done with Apple Watch. The watch is about health, and the financial products are about financial health. We're trying to help our users, said Cook, but these things have to stand on their own, obviously. Served a reminder that there's a world outside the U.S. was UBS analyst David Vogt. Carriers say demand was softer in the March quarter. What might accelerate that? Yeah, he apparently missed the secret word. Things might have been soft in the States, but Where results were really stellar during this quarter was really in the emerging market, said Cook, and we couldn't be prouder of the results we had there. We'll finish with Piper Sandler analyst Harsh Kumar, who got an answer from Cook that was both admirable and kind of jarring. He asked the CEO where the largest opportunity is in Apple's services offering. You're doing a great job, you just set a record, but surely there must be areas where you think you can do better. Said the CEO, I think we can do better on everything, and so I wouldn't just point to one of them. If you look at the number of active devices and the growth of active devices, I think our services are under-penetrated in a number of different ways. And so the way that I look at it is, there's opportunity in many of them. Was that all? Not even close. Lots of ways to learn more if you want to. If you missed the call and want to hear it yourself, the replay is up on Apple's investor site, investor.apple.com. That'll be there for a couple of weeks. It's also available as a podcast, which should also be available for a couple of weeks. If you're more of a reader than a listener, really? Also, Seeking Alpha has a transcript of the call. That made my life so much easier, and many thanks to them. The next few days will likely bring reaction from analysts. We'll hit those and other news starting again on Monday. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/macOSKen. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media. Online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.